Okay, so I'm going to go through 4 ways of solving this equation. X squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. So I encourage you to pause the video first and try it yourself. And then follow along with me. And then afterwards, try to do it yourself. If you get stuck, look back at the video. Keep doing it over until you can do the whole thing yourself without having to look. Okay, so the first method we're going to use is factoring. So in order to factor, we need to find a pair of numbers that add up to b, which is the middle term, which in this case is 1, right? There's an invisible 1 there because x is the same as 1x, and multiply to c, which is the last term, which is negative 6, right? It's not just the last number, it's the last term, including the sign. So it's negative 6 in this case. Also remember, a, b, and c don't include the x, it's just the coefficient. Okay, so over here our b is 1 and our c is negative 6. So we need to find a pair of numbers that add up to 1 and multiply it to negative 6. Pause the video and try to do it yourself. And okay, so the easiest way to go about this is first find all the pairs that multiply to the last term. So keep in mind that it's negative. So one of them is going to have to be negative, one of them is going to have to be positive. Okay? If it was plus 6, then they would have to both be negative or both be positive. Okay? So since it's negative, we have negative 1 times 6, or negative 6 times 1, or negative 3 times 2, or negative 2 times 3. Now, look at each of these and see which one adds up to 1. So this adds up to 5, this adds up to negative 5, this adds up to negative 1, this adds up to positive 1. So, our numbers are negative 2 and 3. So that means that this is going to factor to x minus 2 times x plus 3 equals 0. Now, if these multiply to 0, then that means either this, x minus 2, is going to have to equal 0, and or x plus 3 is going to have to equal to 0. So, if x minus 2 equals 0, add 2 to each side, we get x equals 2. Notice it's the opposite of this. When you have x minus 2 as one of the factors, one of the solutions, right, also called zeros or roots of the equation, is going to be x equals 2. And when you have x plus 3 as a factor, one of the roots is going to be x equals negative 3. Okay, so there. That is solved using factoring. Okay, using the quadratic formula, right? We have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So you don't have to memorize this because I give it to you on the Regent, but you do have to know how to use it and plug it in and then simplify it, okay? So, in this case, our a is, what? A is 1. So, pen isn't working. A is 1. B is going to be also 1, and C is going to be negative 6. So let's write that out here. A equals 1, B equals 1, and C equals negative 6. Okay, so now let's rewrite this the formula, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a, plugging in these values. Okay, so negative b, it's going to be negative 1 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's going to be 1 squared, minus 4ac minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 6. All that over 2a, which is 2 times 1. Be careful that your multiplying signs don't look like negatives. Okay. Okay, now simplify it. We simplify starting with, don't skip steps here, that's a very common mistake and that's going to mess you up. So we're going to start simplifying by dealing with what's in the radical, step by step. Okay, so 1 squared is 1, 4 times 1 times negative 6 is negative 24. So it's minus negative 24, right? Because there's a minus on here, so it's minus whatever this is, and this is negative 24, over 2 times 1 is 2. Okay? Notice how I'm doing it step by step, not skipping steps, not deciding that what's inside the radical right away, right? First I'm solving b squared, then I'm solving for ac. Now I can figure out what's in the radical. 1 minus negative 24. If you're not familiar with adding and subtracting negative numbers yet, then type into your calculator and you'll see that it's 25, right? Notice I'm not skipping to make this 5, the square root of, even though I know the square root of 25 is 5. Not skipping steps, okay? Next step, negative 1 plus or minus 5 over 2. Now I split it up. Okay, negative 1 plus 5 over 2. Negative 1 minus 5 over 2. Okay, step by step, I'm skipping. Negative 1 plus 5, if you don't know, plug it into your calculator. It's 4 over 2. That gives us 2. Negative 1 minus 5 is negative 6 over 2. Gives us negative 3, which is the same as what we got before, which is good. Okay, next. Next is completing the square. Okay, completing the square. Oops, too far there. For completing the square, okay, so the first step is to get it into vertex form by adding b over 2 squared minus b over 2 squared. Okay, I think we're gonna have to erase this. So just a minute here, right? And in the meantime, look over the steps. Right. Okay. You could just skip this part. If I get a chance, I'll cut it out myself, but I probably will not have time. So, this shouldn't take more than a minute. Okay. So, step 1, get into vertex form. This is also useful for getting into vertex form, which they may ask you. Okay? So, getting into vertex form, plus b over 2 squared and minus b over 2 squared. So, as we said before, and oops, I erased the problem itself. So, I'm going to have to rewrite that. What was it? X squared plus x minus 6, I believe, equals 0. Okay? So, the first step is add b over 2 squared and minus b over 2 squared. So, and we're going to add that in right over here. Okay, so we have x squared plus x. Now, what's b in our case? B in our case is 1. Okay, so here, let's put that over to the side. B equals 1. So, b over 2 squared is going to equal b over 2 squared is going to equal 1 over 2 squared. And 1 over 2 squared equals 1 over 4. Okay, so we're going to do plus 1 over 4 and minus 1 over 4 minus 6, right? Bringing that back down here. Right? And we're allowed to do this because we're not changing the value of this because we're doing plus 1 over 4 and minus 1 over 4, which technically cancel each other out, so we're not really changing the value, but this allows us to complete the square, right? That allows us to make this, what's this going to equal? This is going to come out to x plus 1 over 2, right? And I know that it's going to be 1 over 2, it's going to be whatever b over 2 is. Right, because that way when we multiply this a half times itself, we're going to get 1 over 4, and when we add them, we're going to get 1. Okay, so I know that this is going to come out to x plus a half squared minus 1 over 4 minus 6 equals 0. Now, combine like terms, minus 1/4 and minus a sixth. So you can put that into your calculator, and you should get, just think, 24 over 4, so that would be minus 25 over 4 equals 0. Now, if not for the fact that this is also useful for finding the vertex, I might skip this, but this completing the square is useful because this is what's called vertex form. Sometimes they'll ask you to find a vertex form, and this is it. This is how you do it. Okay, now continuing the completing the square process, if we add, the next step we're going to do is step number 3, get the numbers onto the other side. So to do that, we're going to add 25 over 4 to each side. And we got x plus 1 over 2 squared equals 25 over 4. And this is another good thing to know. When you have something like this, something squared, so you take the square root of each side and make it positive and negative. So sometimes it'll give you something, let's say, just like this on the region. Sometimes it'll give you a problem just like this, x plus a half, in parentheses, squared equals 25 over 4. And the way to solve that is you take the square root of each side. So completing the square is perhaps the not the easiest way, but it's good because it includes parts that are parts that are useful for other things. Okay, so that we take the square root of each side. Don't forget positive and negative. 25 over 4. Okay, the square root of 25 over 4, if you don't know, plug it into your calculator. Plug it in as a fraction, so it'll give it back to you as a fraction. And that will equal positive or negative 5 over 2. Okay, so, and the square root of, in parentheses, x plus a half squared, well, the square root of anything squared is itself, right? The square root of aleph squared, right, is going to be aleph, right? Whatever's inside the square root, right, because squared and square root cancel each other out. So when we take the square root of this, we are going to be left with just plain x plus a half without the squared equals positive negative 5 over 2. Subtract 1 over 2 from each side. We get x equals positive or negative 5 over 2 minus 1 over 2. Now we're going to split this up into 2. Okay, first the positive 5 over 2 minus 1 over 2, and negative 5 over 2 minus 1 over 2. And you could plug this into your calculator as a fraction, and you should get 4 over 2, which is 2, and negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6 over 2 equals negative 3. Okay, and we're getting the same answer still, which is good. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, now for the last method, and this one is the coolest method, and I would just use this method alone, except sometimes they ask you specifically to do it by factoring or using the quadratic formula. This one uses a calculator. Ooh. Okay, so can we get this on the other side, please? Thank you. Okay, so for using the calculator, first we have to turn it on. Okay, so we have our equation here, right? X squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, so we go to y equals, and type in x squared plus x minus 6. And you should get very good at this because this is a very useful trick for a lot of things on the Regent. X squared plus x minus 6, and your teacher will probably hate it, but it's useful. And Okay, so now we can graph. Let's see what our graph looks like. Okay, now as we can see, there are 2 points of intersection, right? There's one right here. Hey, where's my pointer? There's one. Okay, I can't use my pointer. There's one on the left side, and there's one on the right side. So we're going to have to do this process twice now to find the point of intersection. So we press second, then calc, then 5 for intersect, or you can scroll to it. Now, first move, let's start with the left one. So I'm going to move the cursor over there. It doesn't have to be exactly on it, it just has to be closer to one than the other. And press enter 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And what's important is the x value. So x equals 3. So let me write that down. Except my pen is not working again. But okay, x equals 3. And then and you should write that down. And then I repeat the process again to find the other point of intersection. Second, calc, 5, intersect. Then move it over. It just has to be closer to that side. So it doesn't have to be exactly on it. And then press enter 3 times. 1, 2, 3. X equals 2. So that gives us x equals -3 and x equals 2. And my pen still is not working. Okay, now this is very useful. Why? Because let's say you forget how to factor. Okay, there we go. Let's say you forget how to factor. Okay, so from the calculator we got x equals -3, comma 2, right? X equals -3 or x equals 2. Now, this is very useful. Why? Let's say you forget how to factor, right? So if you remember, when we were factoring, we got x squared, right? We had x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. So if you factor, right, you need to find a pair of numbers that multiply to this and add up to the b, the middle term, which is 1, right, which was plus 3 and minus 2. Well, if you forget how to do that, but you were able to use the calculator to know that the answer is -3 and 2, you can just fudge it. If you know that it's -3 and 2, you know that the factors are going to be the opposite, x plus 3 and x minus 2. You can also use this, you can't really use it for the quadratic formula, but you can use, not exactly this, but you can use the calculator also to help you do the completing the square. For completing the square, and also actually getting into vertex form, right, which was this, right? If, let's say, they ask you to get into vertex form. So what you can do is this. Vertex form is x plus x minus x minus, where is that? X minus the vertex. Well, first let me point out what the vertex is. Okay, the vertex is this point right here, right? Either the minimum or the maximum. Okay, now the coordinates of the vertex, right? Let's call them h and k. So the vertex form is x minus h, which is the x coordinate of the vertex, squared, plus, what is it? Plus, I believe it's the y coordinate of the vertex, which we'll call k. Okay, this is the vertex form. So now, let's say we forget how to do the vertex form, right? The way to do the vertex form, by the way, is plus and minus b over 2 squared, and then factor it into a complete square, just like we did over here, right? The first steps of completing the square. But if you forget how to do that, you can use the graphing calculator. If it's opening up like this, then we're going to be looking for the vertex is going to be a minimum. If it would be going like this, up, like a hill, then the maximum, the top, would be the vertex. Okay, so over here it's right, the vertex is a minimum, so we do calc. Now, instead of intersect this time, we do minimum, which is 3. Okay, so see over here it says left bound, right? So we need to go to the left of the vertex, which in this case is the minimum. Press enter. Now it says over there right bound, so we're going to go to the right of the vertex. And press enter. And then just go close to the middle, you don't have to be exact, and press enter. And it will give you the vertex, or at least it should. Okay, so you see the vertex is negative 0.5, which is negative a half. I'm not sure why it has that extra 0.5 there. And the y coordinate is negative 6 and a quarter. So from that, we can figure out what the vertex form is. It's going to be... Can we keep that up here? Okay, so let me just get that. It's going to be... Okay, our vertex is going to be negative 5, comma, negative 6.25. So let me write that down. The vertex is at negative 0.5, comma, 6, negative 6.25. Okay, so remember h is our the x coordinate of the vertex, and k is the y coordinate of the vertex. So using that graph in the calculator, we can find that the vertex form is going to be x minus h squared. Sorry, instead of writing h, we will know that h is going to be what? Negative a half. Right, from right here. So negative 0.5 and plus k is negative 6.25, sorry. And this is actually the same as this. We just need to clean it up a little bit. Subtracting a negative here, that's the same as adding, so this is the same as x plus 0.5 squared. Adding a negative is the same as subtracting, so this is minus 6.25 equals 0. So now they're almost the same. The only difference is that this here on the right is in a decimal, right, and this is in fraction. That might bother your teacher. I don't know if he'll take off points for that, but technically they are the same thing. So using the graph, we can use that for factoring, and we can also use it to find the vertex. Most importantly, we can use it to find the root, or the solution, or the zeros. Those are all interchangeable. Root, zeros, and solution. We can use it to find that, right, like we did right here. We can also use it to find the factors, like we did over here, by using the root. It's going to be the opposite of the root, slash solution, slash zeros. And we can also use it to put the equation into vertex form, like we did right over here. Okay, let's just quickly run through a couple region questions. Right here. Okay, so let's see. 178 is a little bit tricky, so we'll skip that. Okay, so read 179, see if you can figure it out yourself. So he determined that the zeros are negative 6 and 5. If the zeros are negative 6 and 5, right, this is what we were just doing, then the factors, right, if the roots slash zeros slash solutions are negative 6 and 5, then the factors are going to have to be x plus 6 and x minus 5, which is choice 3. Okay, 180 is a factoring question, right? In order to factor this, we need to find a pair of numbers that multiply to 24 and add up to 10. So you can pause it and try to find a pair of numbers. Those are going to be x. Well, the way to do it, if you can't see it right away, find all the things that multiply to 24. So that would be 6 times 4, also negative 6 times negative 4, or 12 times 2, also negative 12 times negative 2, and also 24 times 1, and negative 24 times negative 1. The more you do of these, the quicker you'll be able to see it right away without having to go through each choice, right? If you go through each choice, you'll see the one that adds up to 10 is 6 and 4. So this is going to factor to x plus 6 and x plus 4. So what could B be? Well, it could go either way. It could be either this could be A and this B, or this B and this A. So the answers would be 6 or 4. Okay, which solution has the same solutions is the same as this? So what you can do is you can multiply these, right? Foil each one of these out and see which one of them comes out to the same as this. So to foil this, we would get 2x squared, then negative, well, it doesn't matter what order you do it in, just as long as you do 1 to 1. So 6x, and then a negative x, right? 6x minus x minus 3, right? These combine to become 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. No, that doesn't work. Okay, this one comes out to 2x squared minus 6x plus x minus 3, which comes out to 2x squared. This is going to come out to minus 5x, so that doesn't work. And you could do that for each one of them, and you should get, I believe this one will be the answer, right? We'll get plus 3x and minus 2x. That will give us a plus 1x, and you'll get a negative 3 by multiplying those, so the answer would be 4. Okay. For this one, you can use pretty much any method. If you are going to use any of the, I'm going to do it by showing you how to do it with the calculator, because I think it's the easiest. But if you do any of those other methods, the first thing you're going to want to do is divide everything by 3 to make it easier. So you'll have x squared minus x minus 2. Okay, remember, zeros of the function means what value of x makes this equal to 0. So I'm going to show you how to do it on the calculator. Okay, like before. Y1 equals 3x squared minus 3x minus 6. 3x squared minus 3x minus 6. And y2 equals 0, right? Because we want to find the zeros. Graph and you should see 2 points of intersections showing up. Yep, there are 2 points of intersections. Okay, to find each one, we do calc, intersect, go near the one on the left. Okay, you don't have to be right on it. 1, 2, 3, enter 3 times, and we get one answer is negative 1. Okay, so that eliminates choice 2 and 3, so it's either 1 and 4. So now we have to see, and even without doing the process, in this case we can see clearly that the other one is going to be positive 2. So really, actually, in this case, it's pretty easy to see even without doing the intersect thing, but where it's not multiple choice, or where they give you it's not so clear, it's useful to use the intersect. So in this case, it's clearly going to be choice 4. Okay, 183 is the same way. And one good thing to know is if you're not seeing anything showing up, it could be it's because it's off the graph. So what you can do in that case is zoom out. 3 is zoom out. When you press, after you press zoom out, you have to press enter, and then it will zoom out for you. Okay. Another useful zoom sometimes is zoom. If let's say things aren't clear, right? Then a useful thing to use is zoom fit, which is you can go up, and it's on the bottom. It's 0 right there. Zoom 0 is zoom fit. is sometimes useful if it's not showing up. But I would start with zooming out. Okay, fine. So I have to go now, but hope that helps. And